Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Access to Democracy returns. I'm your host, Alan Miller. With us today, a first-time guest. Very pleased to have her, Rabbi Miriam Jerris, who is the rabbi, I would say the chief rabbi for Humanistic Judaism in the United States and Canada, and welcome.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks, Alan.
Just flew in from Michigan.
I did.
And people will ask several things. Number one, what is Humanistic Judaism? Number two, a woman rabbi. Number three, how did she become a rabbi? So why don't you tackle those in whatever order you wish?
Sure. Well, I have an interesting story about the woman rabbi, because when I was in college, I wrote to Hebrew Union College, which was the Reform Seminary, and I asked for an application to the Rabbinic Seminary. And they wrote back and said, we don't admit women into the Rabbinic Seminary. And I was so naive that I couldn't believe it. So many years later, I involved myself in Humanistic Judaism. We created our own seminary, and I graduated from the seminary called the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism, which is the seminary for humanistic Jewish rabbis. And we accept every gender. The other important thing I think about who we accept is that most of the other seminaries will not accept somebody who is dating or married to someone who is not Jewish and not converted. And we do not have that selection criteria. If you are qualified, you get admitted into our program.
So you wanted to become a rabbi, you became a rabbi.
Right.
Now, people know of Orthodox Judaism, of conservative,
Right.
of Reform, even Reformation, etc. What is Humanistic Judaism?
Well, Humanistic Judaism is an attempt to bring together humanistic values and Jewish culture. We see Judaism as the evolving and historical culture of the Jewish people. Religion is part of that, but it is not all of that. So we claim the entire tradition of the Jewish people as our own. And what we do in Humanistic Judaism is we look at evidence. We realize that there is no evidence for or against a superior being that interferes in our life. So we live our lives as if we are responsible for what happens in our lives. We take that responsibility and we make a difference. We follow the Jewish calendar, but we do it from a human-centered, humanistic perspective.
As opposed to a theistic.
As opposed to a theistic perspective, so that when people say, how do you pray? The answer is, well, there's not an entity that we pray to, so that the things we say when we come together are things that we value. They're the values that we hold dear. They're the things we believe in. And that's really the beauty of Humanistic Judaism, is that we're able to say what we believe and believe what we say.
And I know that there's also a concept that's called Sedaka. And I know that that is very important to humanistic Judaism. Why don't you explain that?
Well, sure. Tzedakah comes from the root word to mean righteous, but it's doing good things. And because we believe that human beings are responsible for making a difference in the world and for helping those less fortunate, it's the things that we do, the compassionate ways that we deal with people less fortunate than ourselves, and it's very much a key value of humanistic Judaism.
I think human beings are doing a lousy job at the moment as you look around the countries that are in strife and where people's rights are really being trampled, and war, killing. It's very depressing. It
is very difficult, and I know a lot. You've got a big picture approach to things. I found that the way I cope with that knowledge is that I know that I can make a difference in people's lives one-on-one, and that's how I cope with that big picture of not being able to manage to fix the world, is that I know that I can make a difference in individuals' lives.
So when and how did humanistic Judaism get its start?
Okay, so in 1963, a Reform rabbi whose name was Sherwin T started a congregation in the northern suburbs of Detroit. And it truly was a suburban congregation, the first suburban congregation outside of the city limits of Detroit. And that's how they started. But Rabbi Wine was a philosophy student, and he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And he moved this Reform congregation from a Reform suburban congregation of young couples to a congregation that began to question everything. And they developed a new approach to liturgy, a new liturgy, a way to celebrate holidays, and they did it together. And the Birmingham Temple, which was a suburb of Detroit, and that's why they called the congregation Birmingham Temple, was started in '63. In 1965, the Detroit papers picked up The Atheist Rabbi, and Time magazine picked up a story on the atheist rabbi, and then we went national.
And of course, knowing a bit about humanistic Judaism, I think that that's really an unfair designation. One of the things I know about it is that people are free to believe what they want to believe, and it's just that nothing is imposed on you, which seems to me a much more intelligent way to approach religion or non-religion or whatever your beliefs are.
Absolutely, and I know that almost every interview for people that aren't familiar with humanistic Judaism starts with, well, isn't humanistic Judaism the home for atheist Jews? And there are, of course, people in humanistic Judaism who would identify as atheists, but there's many who would identify as many other of the theological positions that you can take. And you're exactly right. The whole question is really left out of the equation. You don't need to talk about what you don't believe. We're humanists. We talk about the values that we affirm and the things we do believe in.
So what brings you to Minnesota?
Well, one of my favorite communities ever, Oramet, is the local community and congregation here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I have known the people involved in this congregation since the beginning. And periodically I make a visit, and we have a really wonderful weekend planned that where I'll spend time with the members of the congregation. We'll spend some time tomorrow night. We've got a public event and at the St. Paul Jewish community. And it'll give me an opportunity to spread the word and also to be with the members of the community who don't really get to see people from the national organization that often.
Now, talking about the spread of humanism, and is it fair to say that there are now congregations throughout the United States and Canada?
Yes, we have one in Canada, in Toronto, Ontario. And obviously we're open to starting communities. Mostly the larger metropolitan areas is where there's interest in, I mean, there's interest in smaller areas too, but there's just usually not enough Jews in the smaller areas to create a community for humanistic Judaism.
That's something I was just going to raise. But they don't have to be Jews to be members of Or-Emet or to be part of humanistic Judaism.
No, they
and
don't.
as a matter of fact, I know of my own knowledge that the president of the local congregation, Or-Emet, is not Jewish.
Right, right. If people identify or find affinity with the values and ideas of humanistic Judaism, we welcome them. They can identify as humanistic Jews or not. We have a lot of families that are intermarried, interculturally married, interfaith married. One partner may come from a Jewish background, the other partner may not, but feel very comfortable with the humanism piece of it. And we don't have, you know, a standard that you have to convert, or if you identify, self-identify with what's happening in the community, you are welcome to be a part of it.
So what's the difference between humanistic Judaism and Unitarianism?
Well, Unitarianism is a broad-scale approach that kind of takes in all ideas, beliefs, religions, whereas humanistic Judaism is focused on Jewish culture and also on humanism. Not all Unitarians are humanists. So in Unitarianism, you get a much broader approach to things, where in humanistic Judaism, I mean, the approach is Judaism. It is Jewish culture.
I know you have a regular publication, and we brought in a copy if they want to do a close-up on it from the control room or the cameras. This comes out how often and who contributes?
Well, it comes out a couple of times a year. We usually look for contribution from members, so some of the leadership writes, but also individuals in our communities write as well. It depends on what the topic is. The next topic after this one, which is food and Jewish culture, is 50 years of humanistic Judaism. So most of the writers will be people that have been involved for a length of time. And it's topical, but it's also, it's a very good study group resource as well. And if you want to kind of hit the intellectual end of humanistic Judaism, I think that the journal is a good example of just what the current thinking is on a variety of topics.
What have you seen in terms of the growth of the local organization, Or-Emet, which I think is about 20 or 25 years old?
Right. Or-Emet has done a really wonderful job. The last 5 to 7 years, it's been one of our star communities. And there's been a steady increase or stability, which is unique, really, in the movement right now. We only have a few congregations that are building. And what I noticed the last time I was here was there's a different feel when you come into Or-Emet now. There's a warmth, there's a feeling of being welcome. And I think that sense of welcoming people into the community has really solidified the growth here. And we know from the Pew study and just from our own knowledge that many Jews believe the same kinds of things that humanistic Jews believe. But a lot of Jews are very comfortable attending a Jewish community once or twice a year, and they're happy with it. So it's the more unusual person, I think, that looks for a local community that wants to get together on a couple of times a month to study or to celebrate together, and during that time to say things that strike a chord of truth that really has relevant contemporary meaning for people today.
So would anybody be welcome to join a congregation of Humanistic Judaism?
Absolutely.
Gay couples,
Oh, absolutely.
transgender,
Absolutely.
ethnically different?
Yep. We have many families who are interracially married. We have families who adopt kids from other countries. So there, you walk into our congregations and you see diversity. And I think that's one of the most significant values of Humanistic Judaism, is the openness to diversity. And I think beyond openness, I think really an invitation to diversity.
Educationally, what would be offered?
Well, for adults, there's wonderful ways to study together. We have fantastic videos available that are interesting and intellectually interesting. There's a lot of literature. Our kids' schools are fantastic. We have a new topical curriculum that's been approved by the national organization, so that there are some standards for what we think kids should learn and when they should learn it. And they learn about the holidays and the history, and they learn the mythology and the stories and the legends of the Jewish people.
So from what age to what age do these schools go? Are they Sunday schools as such, or what?
Yeah, and some have midweek schools as well. I've noticed a lot of the schools have added their Hebrew program for the older kids onto Sunday. So I think most of the schools are meeting on Sunday at this point. And, preschool to confirmation, high school, and
When you
adults
say
as well.
Confirmation, there's a confirmation which in the Jewish religion is bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah for women.
It's actually the one after that, which is kind of 15, 16, after 10th grade.
Okay.
And some of the schools have high school classes as well. So, the bigger schools will keep teaching as long as people are interested in learning.
Do these congregations contribute to the national organization, which I guess is located where you're located,
It's
right, in
located where
Michigan?
I'm located in Metro
Michigan.
Detroit, in Farmington Hills, Michigan. And yes, if as an affiliate, they contribute financially, and there are certain benefits. I'm one of them, so my visit is a benefit of the affiliation.
And what do they, other than the fact that they get the chance to see you, what benefits do they
Well,
get?
they
from
get the
being-
journal, and we have a couple of e-newsletters, one that's for members only. We have another member-only newsletter. And the resources, we have an online resource community of hundreds and hundreds of documents that range from youth curricula to Rosh Hashanah, High Holiday, Hanukkah celebrations, all the holidays, adult education curricula. So you name it, all the organizational development kinds of materials that you're looking for. So that online resource is really precious.
Now, membership in most religious organizations has, at least in this country, has been falling.
Yes.
And I know there's a study called the Pew Study, which indicates that, in particular, in Jewish religions, the Jewish religion, many of the young people are drifting away from the liturgy or drifting away from theology. So do you have a comment on the Pew Study?
Well, the Pew Study is an interesting study, and I will be talking about it at length tomorrow, but the most significant piece, I think, is that 60% of Jews look at Judaism as primarily ancestry and culture, which is very much how humanistic Jews look at Judaism. Although in humanistic Judaism, we are unique from the standpoint that Jewish community and being part of a Jewish community is of great value. whereas only 28% of the people in the Pew study said Jewish community was important. What seems to be important to kids today and adults are the values. The values that we would consider humanistic values, a good sense of humor, education, social justice. Those values were all rated very, very highly in the Pew study as being the most significant aspects of Judaism for people. So I think that humanistic Judaism meets a important but niche market, and that for the future we're going to need to look at different models, just like every other part of Jewish life is going to have to look at different models so that people find ways to access and celebrate their Jewish identity in different ways. And I don't know what that's going to look like yet.
Is it fair to say that while the organization is not political, it's very involved in social issues?
Yeah, I would say, human rights is a core principle of humanistic Judaism, so we are involved in those kinds of issues. And we sign on to all these, amicus briefs for many of the separation of church and state issues. So, yeah, we're right there.
How regimented is the organization nationally? For instance, we know that for Catholics, the Pope speaks with one voice. Do you speak with one voice and dictate to the congregations throughout the country and Canada?
Not even close. I teach the rabbinic students, and I teach them a course in congregational management. And the thing I teach them first and foremost is that rabbinic leadership in humanistic Judaism is not what their dream may have been. It is definitely horizontal, participatory. It happens to be my leadership style, so I'm very comfortable here. But I happen to have a certain amount of education in a certain field, but I am not an authority figure or authoritarian on any particular issue.
While I was researching, I noticed that you have a degree in pastoral counseling.
Yes.
And is that obtained from another school, or is it obtained through your Jewish history and really education?
Yeah, I have a master's degree in clinical psych, and my PhD was in Jewish studies and in counseling together. So I've combined them, and we have one course in counseling in the rabbinic seminary, so most of the coursework that I've done has been outside of the Jewish studies area in the pastoral counseling.
You say the rabbinic seminary, therefore you are not the only one. You are not the rabbi for humanistic Judaism.
I am not. No, there are about 12 to 15 of us, and some of the rabbis have come from the Reform movement and now identify as humanistic rabbis. Others we have, I believe we've ordained 12 rabbis through our own seminary since 1999. I was ordained in 2001. And we serve in all capacities, not just congregational life.
And are there people studying now to become rabbis?
Yeah, we've got like 5 or 6 students working right now. And we're getting some pretty exciting people involved. People that didn't grow up in the movement, which is, I think...
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
So, people always equate Judaism with Israel. What is the relationship of humanistic Judaism with Israel, with the government of Israel, which is kind of fractured, as a matter of fact?
Yeah, absolutely. So we support the state of Israel. We support Israel's right to safe and secure borders. We support the rights of all people living in the area for peace and self-determination. So we always say we support the state and we support the people of Israel. We are very connected to a group of people who identify as secular humanistic Jews in Israel. There are 26 ordained humanist rabbis in Israel.
Is that right?
Yeah, which is pretty exciting. And they do a tremendous amount of education in the army. So they're much more mainstream because Israel, maybe not government-wise, but otherwise is much more secular.
I've read that the approach of humanism in Israel, and I didn't realize there were that many rabbis there, but is that the government there has to come to the realization that there should be two states, that the Palestinians should have their own state, their own country. Is that a precept of humanism, or is that an individual?
It's really individual. I mean, the couple of principles that I laid out, I think, are pretty broad, and that's where we go. We know that in Humanistic Judaism that we have people that have ideas and positions on the whole breadth and depth of issues. And we don't want to take very narrow positions because it's important that people feel that they can have a home here and that, that they don't have to have very narrow and specific beliefs about everything.
Now, obviously, Sherwin Wine must have been a visionary of some sort. We don't have that much time left, but give us a little bit of background about Sherwin Wine. And I know he's no longer with us.
Right. Sherwin grew up in Detroit. His father was very traditional, so he grew up in a conservative synagogue. He went to the University of Michigan and studied philosophy. And got a master's degree in philosophy, and then went to the Reform Seminary. He already knew he was a humanist, but he liked Jewish culture, and he wanted to serve the Jewish people. So he served in Detroit. He served in in Korea, not in the war, but in Korea. He served at a small congregation in Windsor, Ontario, and then he started Humanistic Judaism in 1963.
I guess it would be fair to say, and I know he was killed in a traffic accident a few years ago, it would be fair to say that he was a wandering Jew, and I know the local organization slogan is a home for wandering Jews.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Ora Met's unique contribution to Humanistic Judaism, and I love it. Rabbi Wine, he very clearly understood who he was.
Now, Ora Met does not have a rabbi, I understand. They have a madrich.
Right. So
what's a madrich? And we only have about a half a minute left.
Okay, so a madrich is a ceremonial leader. I mean, that's the best way to characterize it.
A person that's trained?
Trained.
A person that's authorized to lead the congregation?
Right, and more importantly, to officiate wedding ceremonies.
Weddings, funerals,
Right.
and all the things that a rabbi would do.
All the things that a rabbi would do. And
Rabbi Miriam Jerris, thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us, and I'm sure people will feel educated by listening to you.
Well, thanks,
again.
Alan. It was good to be here.